product of a lack of growth is poverty and crime. Those are like back to Econ 101.
Right.
And so just own it. Just if you're going to oppose growth in all of these forms, if you're not going to put a priority on economic development and new industry coming to town, that's your prerogative to do that, to avail yourself of the civic process. But people need to just understand that they're a part of the problem.
Right.
And you don't get to lament that, right, as you perpetuate it.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with Skip Foster, former publisher of the Tallahassee Democrat, popular weather hobbyist, and creator of the Fanatical Middle news blog. He is a lifelong journalist, husband, and father of 3 who values respectful and nuanced discourse, which makes him a popular and trusted facilitator of important community discussions. A Florida native with strong Carolina roots, Skip is passionate about sports, leadership, the value and role of journalism, and as you've already heard, how responsible growth is the only real answer to our community's ongoing battle against crime and poverty. We started our conversation with how he would describe himself today.
I'm a curious guy. I like to know about people. I like to know about things. I like to know why things work or don't work. I'm always looking for contrary information, and so that makes me not, in some ways, a great fit, and in other ways, not a particularly good fit in where our culture is heading, which is toward a really polarized society. So right. I'm not going to fit neatly into red buckets or blue buckets or all of the other ways we divide ourselves up. And so that's something I would want to know. I would want people to know about me is, hey, I'm not likely to fit in places where you might want me to be.
Well, what do you think that is about you that kind of wants to not be pigeonholed or stay flexible as far as the different camps that seem to be being established in our society?
And it's not just political camps or ideological camps. I think there's all sorts of ways people do it. I don't know, other than I'm a skeptic. And so if it's too easy, I generally am very dubious about that. And so if someone is going to say, hey, everything about this philosophy or this person, I disagree with all of it, or I agree with all of it, I think that's a really kind of oversimplistic and frankly a little bit of a dangerous way to live your life. So,
and it's a little lazy too, right? You don't have to think about anything.
Right. It's very much so. So, I would want the person to know that I have an amazing wife and family. I would want them to know the things I'm interested in, which are most all of the sports and golf and football in particular, that I've spent a long career in journalism, which I loved every minute of, not the journalism part, the leadership part, the marketing part, all of that stuff, and that I worry about my old field a lot, and the impact the decline in journalism will have on the Republic. And, there are a lot of people that'll laugh at that, but I think that's a real thing. So
I know you were born in Lakeland, right? I, too, am a product of Imperial Polk County.
Oh, my gosh.
I grew up in Haines City.
All right.
So what was it like growing up for you in the Lakeland area?
It was just a very typical childhood. I mean, we had a grapefruit and an orange and a tangerine tree in the front yard.
Right.
And I didn't eat any of them, right? I mean, when they're plentiful and, you don't want it. And then when you don't have it anymore, you wondered why you didn't eat all of that stuff.
Right.
I went to public schools that were, integrated and successful. And it was, I would say, a kind of unremarkable childhood.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I have a sister who now lives in town and is a real estate agent.
Tell me about your parents.
My dad started one of the first software companies way back when in the 80s. Oh. He ended up, he was helping the Tampa Bay Bucks print their tickets and eventually sold that and got into just some, real estate development and other types of projects.
In Central Florida?
Yes. Okay. My mom was a teacher early on and then spent a lot of time, trying to keep me out of trouble. So we started without much at all. My dad was a, true entrepreneur and he was in the selling calculators and chicken and all sorts of things before he founded this business and then did very well. And so I was very lucky.
And it looks like you went to Lakeland High School for at least part of the time, right? So how was high school for you? Were you involved in stuff? Did you enjoy it? What were those?
Yeah, so everybody has parts of their life they wish they could replay. I really wouldn't replay any of my post-education life. I think that's all gone pretty well. Mm-hmm. But I was a lousy student. It was the gap between what the test score said I should be doing and what I was actually doing was large. And so in an effort to kind of jumpstart my academic career, my parents sent me up to McCallie, which was a prep school in Chattanooga, for 11th and 12th grade.
Okay. So the family didn't move. You went to a prep school.
That's right. It didn't really work. I mean, I didn't like getting sent up there away from my friends. But the good news is it was in close proximity to Swanee, the University of the South, that's about an hour away up on Mont Eagle Mountain. And so I learned about that and went there. Still didn't really get my act together till my junior year when I kind of figured it out. And that's where I met Dina, my wife. That's where I got into journalism for the first time, writing sports for the Swanee Purple, the student newspaper there, and that's still doing great work. And that was it.
All right, so I'm not going to let you go through that whole period quite that fast.
Oh, well, I tried to hit the fast forward button.
You did, but yeah, I'm gonna pump the brakes on that. So, what was going on? Do you think? I mean, obviously, you messed up by doing well on the tests, right? To show that you had the capacity to do that. So, what was the disconnect between doing well in school and obviously having the ability to do well on the test? The knowledge was there, it seems like.
Yeah, I was just the tests were more aptitude, I guess IQ type stuff. Mm-hmm. I was just lazy. I mean, I was just lazy. I didn't really know how to study. I just didn't take advantage of what God had given me, which was certainly nothing I had earned. The gift part was there, the work wasn't, and I just needed to learn how to work. So
what flipped that switch for you in college?
Well, desperation. I mean, we were at a point where, I wasn't going to make it, and I needed to flip the switch. I needed to learn how to do it, or, I was going to end up doing some manual labor somewhere, which was probably less appealing to me than actually starting to study and focus on schoolwork.
Right.
There was a guy named Brad Jones who ended up being a very successful Episcopal priest and still is. he really took me under his wing when I presented him this dire situation I was in and guided me through that. And he ended up getting Dean and I married, and so I will always owe him a great debt for that.
Mm. So how did you meet Dina? Was she part of this turnaround or realization that it was time to do
she was
something?
oblivious to it.
Okay.
We just met at a party. I mean, she says, that she picked me out the minute I walked into the student post office.
You don't
or
believe
whatever.
that?
Whatever. But we started dating the middle of my freshman year, which would have been end of '84, beginning of '85, and got married in '91. So we just had our 29th anniversary. Next year will be 30 and 35 years of,
Right.
her being stuck with me. So it's been a great, great marriage.
Yeah. So how did journalism come into the picture? What made you interested in pursuing being part of the paper there?
Yeah, so it was really sports was what I was interested in, and the ability to go, to write about sports. It was more about the sports than the writing. And then I realized that I love the writing too. I had done some stringer work for the Lakeland Ledger, I guess while I was in 10th grade, while I was still in Lakeland, covering some of those great little Polk County and nearby, Fort Meade and,
Right.
and little outlying high school basketball games. But it was the sports that got me interested. And so, that became an obvious place for me to start a career. After Swanee, I drew a line from Texas to North Carolina. I knew I wanted to be in the Southeast and just applied to every sports writing job that was open there. And the two that were open were Burlington and Hickory, both of them paying $270 a week. And I think I got Hickory to go up to $275, and that's why I chose the Hickory Daily Record.
Okay.
So that was the
Some
first job.
strong negotiating there.
Oh yeah, it was. I brought my attaché with me, and
All business.
right.
So your first job was covering local sports?
High school sports at the Hickory Daily Record. So that was an afternoon paper. So the schedule there was lovely. You would go cover an event at night.
Right.
You would either come back and write it, or you would just go to bed and, knowing that you would need to be in the office at, 4 or 5 in the morning. So the paper got printed late morning and delivered hopefully for the lunch crowd in the afternoon. And so that was a lot of times the days were split.
Right.
So you kind of have the afternoon off, but you'd work from 5 to 10 and then from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. or whenever the paper got out.
Right.
Not a great lifestyle for a 23-year-old.
No. So did you enjoy the job? I mean, other than the weird schedule, did you enjoy covering local sports?
I did. And then I was only in Hickory for 6 months. I got recruited to come down to Gastonia to work at the Gaston Gazette under a guy named, the sports editor there was David Poole, who passed away years ago. He ended up becoming one of the really iconic NASCAR beat writers. And so that's a name some folks might recognize. And so I started out doing high school sports there. That was a staff of 7 in Gastonia. My guess is now that's a staff of 2.
Right.
And so I started off doing high school, but it was an amazing time. Gastonia was a Charlotte suburb, or a pseudo suburb, 1 county away, west of Charlotte. And the Hornets were born while I was there.
Oh, okay. That's big news.
So we covered every Hornets. We had a Hornets beat writer, a guy named Bruce Martin. He went with them on the road, and then we would add a reporter or 2 when they played home games. Getting to cover the NBA, when Michael Jordan came to town and all those folks. The real thrill, though, is when David handed off to me the Gaston Gazette's master's press pass and said, "You're going to be our master's writer." And so starting in 89 through 97, with 1 year off there because my daughter was born in 95.
And even that was probably a tough call. Right?
Oh, I mean, it was, I think it was the closest our marriage came to not making it was during that time. So that would have been Faldo 1 was 89, and then Tiger 1 in 97 was my last year covering it. So that was an amazing thrill, and we could do a whole podcast, I guess, on the Masters.
Yeah. I got to go in 2004 for the Wednesday practice round.
Yeah.
And the par 3 tournament, but that was Phil's first win the year.
Yeah. The only downside to my Masters time is they have a media pool where about a quarter to a fifth of the media get to play the course the Monday following the tournament. Wow. It's a drawing. So 89, 90, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I covered it for 8 years. I went 0 for 8. Mm-hmm. The guy that went in my place the year Mary Frances, my daughter,
Don't
was
tell
born.
me he got to play.
Yeah, so he got in and got to play.
That's the worst.
That was that was the only thing that's still stuck in my craw on that. But
that is bad.
That was a real thrill to get to cover that as often as I did.
That's awesome. Did you also kind of move up the ladder of? I know you said you helped cover local Hornets games too. So you moved up from high school sports? Yeah,
and we covered some select ACC games. So I got to sit at the rickety wooden table and cover a Duke Carolina game in Cameron. I got to cover Clemson football in Death Valley.
Wow.
But it just it didn't take too long, other than the Masters, which is in its own league.
Right.
It didn't take too long for me to figure out this was not how I wanted to live my life, right? So counting on Dale Curry to say something interesting at 10:20 p.m. and then transcribing that and writing a game story in 45 minutes. I mean, that was just not. It's when the leadership bug started to really show itself, which I didn't know I had. And again, it's important for me to say about a lot of these things, these aren't things I earned. These are talents that are given to me, and in many cases that I screwed up, I bungled.
Right.
But the leadership bug was definitely something that started to manifest itself, and so I developed a important mentee-mentor relationship with a woman named Jenny Lambert, who was the editor of the Gastonia paper, which at that time was a 40,000 circulation daily with 45, 50 employees, journalists,
right.
I should say, not employees, journalists. And she started to really guide me through a process of getting into management. And so that started out as being the assistant sports editor, which felt like I was a, cabinet secretary. It was such an important title.
Right.
And then I eventually moved over to the news side. I had this ability to design news pages really well. I don't know where that came from. I have no idea, because I can only make stick figures if you ask me to draw something artistic. And then eventually became the managing editor of the Gazette, which was the number 2 person behind Jenny in the newsroom. And so I became managing editor in 92, right after we got married. So I was 26.
That's a pretty big deal.
I was super young, and I was, terrible manager. Thought it was about the stripes on your shoulder and issuing orders, and I mean, I had to. Those poor people that work for me, I still, feel guilty and terrible about all the lessons I had to learn on how you lead people, and so hopefully, I got better because I wasn't very good then.
So you're now managing editor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you go from there to Shelby, or was there another step?
I did. The company I worked for in Gastonia, Freedom Communications, bought the Shelby paper, which was another half an hour to the west, and named me editor after that deal closed. And that, in some respects, was the most fun I had in journalism. So we had a staff of about 22 or so news staff. It's now 4. The Shelby Star was a 20,000 circulation daily. And we did amazing. Some of the stories, and when I say stories, that really means series of stories that we wrote.
Right.
Were just fantastic. And we won a bunch of awards, and the Star became a real force.
So as you kind of move up the ladder in Shelby, at this point, were you hired as a managing editor or executive editor?
No, yeah, I was the editor. I was the top person in the newsroom. And Jenny had been brought over as the publisher from Gastonia. So she and I continued to be a dynamic duo. And when I had some other opportunities, but knew she was going to retire eventually and we loved living in Shelby at that point. Dina was a district court judge. And so when Jenny retired, they made me the publisher of the Star.
So you were the Jimbo Fisher of the Shelby paper?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Publisher in waiting.
Publisher in waiting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. I don't talk as fast as Jimbo, though.
No, you definitely don't.
The poor Jimbo press conference transcriber, I have such empathy for him or her.
That was a challenge. All right, so you go from editor to publisher. Mm-hmm. Tell me what that meant. I mean, I know from when I worked at the Democrat on the ad side for a couple years, my publisher during that time was Carol Dadisman, a news guy.
What a great man.
Yeah, and people on the news side of the operation really appreciated a publisher from the news side. Mm-hmm. That was important to them. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on becoming publisher and then learning. I'm sure you had some exposure to it, but the reality of running the paper as a business alongside with keeping the news operation going, how did you handle all of that?
Yeah, so I was one of the very last editors to become a publisher. That really didn't happen much nationally after, in that period. It started to really drop off, I guess I should say. I loved it. I loved diving in. So we still printed on site at that time and advertising and circulation, and we still had a finance staff in Shelby. So those were my direct reports: the editor, the finance guy, the production guy, the circulation guy, the ad person, ad director. And I loved how those worked in harmony. And if you really could do that work collaboratively, there was huge, there could be a big payoff for the business in the community, right? And so I loved how those pieces worked together. But as the industry declined and consolidation started happening, they started peeling those pieces away from me. And so finance became hubbed over in Gastonia. The printing of the paper moved to Gastonia, and so on. And so when I became publisher is when the consolidation and the real, cutting and decline in the business began.
Right.
And so
your timing wasn't great on that.
No. And so although I'm glad I was there to do that. So it was hard work. It was difficult work to figure out how to retain as many resources as you could, and to figure out how to try to have reductions happen through attrition and other ways. And so I wouldn't have wanted anybody else to have to go through that.
Right. And I do want to talk about how active you were in the community. A member of the Shelby Rotary Club on lots of boards. The United Way presented you with a Lifetime Achievement Award there. What did that mean to you first to be so plugged into the community, part of it in your role, and then to be recognized for that? Tell me about your role in the newspaper and how that all fits both professionally and personally to being so connected to a community like that.
Well, what worked, so what energized me was when an organization wanted me not for my title or for a rubber stamp, but really because it was a vibrant, open to change type organization. And so that was the United Way.
Right.
It was run by a guy named Tom Hassel, then a guy named Bill Hooker, and I was, allowed to say, why do we do it like this? And to ask that question. And we ended up asking that question and really changing things for the better. Mm-hmm. And so those are the kind of organizations that I'm going to engage with and that get my juices flowing. The other thing I'll tell you, Shelby had a crime problem. This is connected to the United Way. Shelby had a crime problem, and there was one shooting in particular that our reporter covered. And one of the things we tried to get reporters to do is there was a big study shown on how people consume the news, and one of the findings, it was this NAA Project 2000. One of the findings was people want more of a feature approach to the news, particularly crime news. And so this reporter, and I can't remember which one it was, I feel dumb that I can't remember that, but this reporter brilliantly included high up in this murder story that a little girl had near the crime scene had opened the screen door and kind of walked down the stairs and said, "Who got shot?" It's just like a 3-4-year-old child. And it really resonated with the community and with me.
Right.
3 or 4-year-olds are supposed to ask, "Where's my ball?"
Right.
Or "What's for dinner?" Or "I'm hungry." And so for a child that young to be so familiar with people getting shot,
right,
that they knew what the crime scene meant. So we huddled together and said, maybe we can't solve the crime problem, but we can write about the impact of crime and other things on children. And so we made that a real focus. And one of the things that we discovered was that there was a lot of helping agencies there to help children, but not enough helpers. And so we pulled a group of community leaders together and ended up creating an event. It was poorly titled Connect, Commit to Change, but it basically became a volunteer fair where the 50 or so agencies in town, private, public, whatever, nonprofit, that were doing things to help children,
right,
could set up a booth and put up a display that says, hey, we need mentors, or we need laptops, or we need people to come build a new handicap ramp at or whatever the need was, and then people could come and they would fill out a commitment card. Well, we ended up getting hundreds of these commitment cards, and we would publish them all, the names of the people and what they were going to do. And that was something that was partnered with the United Way. Well, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it was more than just, we're going to raise, here's our campaign goal.
Filling in the thermometer as it goes out.
Yeah. So, and it's been the same thing here with Katrina and Bernice, where we've done a new strategic plan for the United Way. That's the kind of stuff that interests me. If you just need me to raise my hand and vote aye every 6 weeks at a meeting, whatever. I mean, I'm probably not going to have good attendance at those. But if you want to get engaged and figure out, hey, here it's the Alice population and poverty and how we can address that, that's something I'm interested in doing.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to take a quick break to tell you about the Tallahassee Love Book, featuring 101 ways to love local. It's full of places to eat, shop, and play, services that make your life better, and even podcasts that connect you with local people. You can find them in businesses and offices all over town. There's also a Facebook group where these businesses are sharing their appreciation for you, offering various perks and prizes. The group is called TLH Love Book Insiders. Check it out on Facebook today. All right, so you left Shelby to go to Fort Walton Beach, right?
Yeah, so that was a short stint. Dean and I decided that it was just time to see if there was life outside of Mayberry. Shelby was a small town. It was clear that it was probably not going to support the publisher of a daily paper, financially, that wasn't going to work.
Right.
And indeed, I was the last publisher. I'm the last publisher wherever I go, it appears. So I was the last publisher in Shelby. And so I let at that point, new corporate owners know that I had not been mobile before, but I once was immobile. I now am mobile.
So when you say last publisher, the paper doesn't exist anymore?
The paper doesn't have that position anymore.
Okay. Because they're run on a more corporate level?
Regional level.
Okay.
And the same is true at the Democrat. There's not a publisher. There won't be one, as far as I know.
Okay.
They're not going to fill that position. So Fort Walton Beach, amazing place. We actually lived in Destin and drove over the Destin Bridge on the way to work every day. And, Shelby, I said Mayberry.
Right.
Shelby's a place where you move into a neighborhood and for whatever reason, you're eating banana pudding for the next month because for whatever reason, that's the go-to welcome to the neighborhood gift, right?
Right. And if there's any crime, it gets nipped in the bud.
Right.
So
Fort Walton Beach, one of the most transient places in the country. So the military people at Eglin are coming in and out of there. The snowbirds are coming in and out, the retired military. And so you move into a new neighborhood there and somebody looks out the window and says, they'll be gone in a couple of years. Why go to the trouble?
Right.
And then they say, and if they're not gone in a couple of years, we'll be gone in a couple of years.
Right.
And so it was very sandy soil in which to put roots down in a place where, for a family that came from a place where going to the grocery store was a 3-hour siege of shopping and talking with all the people that you knew. And so Gannett called me and was recruiting me for Pensacola. That's kind of same kind of place, right? I said to them, look, if Tallahassee ever opens up, let me know. So we haven't talked about this, but I was a child of the Bowden era. Everybody in my family went to FSU. We would drive up from Lakeland in the late 70s. Okay. Remember Saturday Night Fever, the old
letting the balloons up,
the old rail car,
stick.
Right. And so
the whole thing.
I still have family here. I still had family here, and I said, boy, and I knew the paper was struggling a little bit, and I said, and that, I'm a turnaround guy. I'd much rather, you take on an A+ operation, all you can do is screw it up. But so it did open up, and we did come over here, and I should say that, Dina made a huge sacrifice when we moved to Fort Walton Beach. She left her judgeship of almost 15 years because Florida has ridiculous lack of reciprocity. She had to study for and sit for the bar again and go through the really humiliating process of getting licensed here.
So you're in Tallahassee, 2014,
right?
Correct? The 10th publisher of the Democrat. You already told me about why you wanted to come to Tallahassee as a city, kind of Bowden Knoll fan, all of that. But did you know a lot about the city and the paper when you came here?
No, I didn't, which was fine because I really like to do my own I have this thing called 5 questions. So I have 2 things when I came into the market. I have a thing called 5 questions that I send to all of the staff members. That was over 100, well over 100 employees at the time. And it's, tell me about yourself and tell me about somebody else that does a really good job at the paper, and who are the 3 people in the community I need to meet, and what are the key strengths and weaknesses, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then the other thing I do is I take those who should I meet in the community and then add to it and just start meeting people and asking them. So internally, they had just gone through a reorganization, which is a fancy way of saying a downsizing in the number of people in the newsroom in particular. Morale was not great. And the best way I can explain what I needed to do is we lived briefly in a town called Kings Mountain when I was in Gastonia and Dina was in Shelby. And there was a circle we would walk around and we would stroll Mary Frances, and she was fascinated because of Goodnight Moon with the moon. And so she would always be looking for it and trying to find it in the sky. Sometimes we'd do in the evening. And you'd have to kind of take her head, which I'm doing right now, but you can't see, and turn and point it towards the moon so she could see it, right?
Right. Pointing doesn't help.
What I needed to do was get our folks to focus on all that we could still do, which was a lot. So I needed to turn their head to the positive space of, hey, we've still got 25 journalists in this newsroom. We've still got all of these ad people. We've got a lot that we can still do. The other thing I was able to do is move some money around and backfill some positions that we had lost that we didn't need to lose. So one of the things when I started with Gannett that people said is, how are you going to deal with that big bureaucracy? Well, the way most people deal with it is they just surrender to it. I said, well, look, I got a plan. It doesn't cost us any more money. I'm going to run it up the flagpole and just make them either say yes or no.
Right.
And navigate the bureaucracy rather than just surrender to it. And so we were able to add we didn't have a capital reporter here in the capital of the 3rd largest state in the union. That didn't seem okay. We didn't have a high school sports reporter. We didn't have a K-12 education reporter. And we didn't have a business reporter. We were able to add all of those things back in without really losing anything.
So why did they go for that?
Because it was expense neutral.
Okay.
And there was no reason not to do it.
What do you mean it was expense neutral? Other positions were not filled that weren't as necessary?
I was able to save some money in some other ways.
Okay.
And so that was an important signal to the community. We care about these areas. It gave me something to tout when I did my "Who the hell is this guy?" tour of, speaking engagements and meetings. And the other thing is we established a strong editorial voice that was independent and unpredictable, right? So it wasn't driven by ideology. It was driven by, here are the facts as we know them, and here's what we suggest be done. So, when I left 5 years later, the right thought I was a commie, and the left thought I was whatever the right-wing equivalent of a commie is. And
that's a compliment, right?
Yeah, and hallelujah for that, because if one side, it always would make me real nervous when one side loved us and the other didn't.
Right.
I worry about that now because nationally it's the case that that if you look at the confidence in media numbers for Democrats and Republicans, the gap has never been bigger. It's like 68 to 17. And that's
Wow.
a relatively recent phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
I worry about that. I worry about it a lot.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it some, but in your opinion, what is the role of a newspaper in a community?
Well, I could answer that in the theoretically, because I'm afraid that role is really, in reality, changing a lot
Right.
as the industry declines.
Well, let me change the question. What did you see the role of the Tallahassee Democrat for the Tallahassee area?
To lead. So to lead by informing and sometimes entertaining our readers on the important issues of the day, by sharing compelling viewpoints, by partnering with businesses on the ad side to help them grow, businesses and organizations to help them grow, get their message, sell their products or services, and to do that with amazing customer service and with integrity.
Do you think that as a whole, the team at the Democrat fulfilled that mission the best they could given the resources they had?
That they've done amazing work, and we have some ways to measure that. Journalism is an art, so it's not easy to measure. But if you...
The team won a lot of awards during that period.
They won a lot of awards. Our digital engagement numbers compared to our peers in Gannett were shockingly high. So we were doing, there's different ways to measure that. The most kind of rudimentary and least useful is page views. But there are other measurements: time spent on site, the stickiness of the site, and we were doing twice the engagement of other newspapers of which we were half their size. So
why do you think that is?
Well, William Hatfield is a just remarkable editor who is everything as a young manager that I don't think I was.
Right.
And then we just had a team of all-stars, the Jeffs, Burlew, and Schweers. Jennifer Portman, before she moved over to USA Today, just did amazing work. Tamarin, Carl, Byron Dobson, and then a lot of these new young reporters, Netta and CD, Ashley White, who was here for some time. Gosh, I know I'm forgetting. The sports crowd is amazing. And they did just tremendous journalism. Some of the reporting on the city public corruption was not easy to do, untangling these land deals and
a lot of pieces.
You try to think about how many undercover FBI investigations have been conducted in the U.S., okay? Now go try to find one where the agent's activities were outed by a newspaper. And there was extensive reporting on who they met with and what they did. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
And yet we were able to do that. And then, of course, there's luck, right? People don't want to talk about luck. We had these unbelievable stories. Markel. Are you kidding me? It's,
right.
Been on Dateline, it seems like every other week.
Mike Williams.
The Mike Williams case, the everything that was going on at FSU with Jimbo and Taggart and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The Hermine and Michael. Responding to those, so we kind of made a commitment on Michael. Hey, we're going to go to these places nobody's heard of, right? Donaldson, Georgia, and little towns that we had to strain to find on a map. And we're going to tell those stories, sometimes just heart-wrenching stories of of the pain that they went through and really document that. And so,
well, that follows your philosophy back to the children in Shelby,
That's
right?
right.
The crime,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
putting a face on it,
Yeah.
making people feel it, not just the statistics and the,
right.
the reality of it.
I think I'm not sure we did as well on that here. Tallahassee's I think the crime issue here is different. And I wish we had been stronger editorially on some things that I think feed into that.
Before you left the Democrat, and now you have always been very engaged in community conversations, whether with the Chamber, Leadership Tallahassee, the Village Square. Why is that important to you, and why do you enjoy that so much?
Well, I like being an antidote to the, as we talked about at the beginning, the just kind of ideologically blinder wearing discourse that too often dominates our public conversation. So I want to make sure people are looking at things from all sides. And so I just think that's important. I think it should be the role of journalism is to, and particularly when there is a prevailing viewpoint on things. COVID is a great example. I'm really drawn to some of the contrary information that doesn't just kind of follow the PAC's, conventional wisdom on things.
Right.
Which I brought this over here and was, and I'm wearing it everywhere I go, the mask that I just held up.
Right.
It's not to say I'm, being stupid about things, but, this is oversimplifying a pandemic is really short-sighted. These are complicated things, and I think it's possible that we know really very little about these things. And so that and a lot of other issues and local issues, I'm just interested in digging and finding more.
Right. Some people today will know you as much from your Facebook page as they do that you were publisher of the Democrat. And that is primarily because you are an invested weather hobbyist. And I want to make sure that is the correct way to represent that, right?
Yes.
Because you're very clear that you are not a meteorologist.
No.
You don't pretend to be one.
No.
You did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
Right.
You are a hobbyist, but a very trusted and followed one. So tell me about your passion for weather and where all that started.
So it started in North Carolina. A Florida boy moved to a climate where once or twice, maybe 3 times a year, it snows. And so that just became, and even at Swanee, I remember I had one of the little NOAA weather radios, and I would listen to the forecast, and I knew what time they would update it. And so I would start listening right around 3 o'clock. And, we got snow at Swanee definitely every year. In fact, we had a horrific ice storm the winter of my freshman year where it was pouring down rain and 9 degrees.
Wow.
And we were without power for a week anyway. But so, and that was so back to North Carolina, that was the dawn of the internet age. And I quickly found that so much of the material that the professional meteorologists were using was available online, for free.
Sure.
And then I found that there were message boards where a lot of these pros would talk to each other. And so you could really find out a lot about what was going on, the computer models and such. And so I would start writing about it, and 2 things then kind of became clear. One is there are a lot of people that really, really, really are fascinated and excited about snow.
Right.
And the second one is, and I really don't know how to explain this, but the way that I presented it was very appealing and interesting to people. And the only thing that I think I've got over the Weather Service, which certainly isn't any meteorological knowledge or anything like that, is just I can operate on my own time. And so, they update generally 2 to 3 times a day. I could do that much more frequently and could kind of in real time, I would do real time model run, kind of chats, right? Where, okay, here comes the 12Z GFS and, as it stands now, we're going to get 8 inches of snow. Let's see if this holds serve. And the same thing, I did a little of that with Hermine and Michael, kind of play by play.
Right.
And so it just became a thing and people really enjoyed it. And I can't fully explain it other than I guess it's just my passion that somehow flows through, what I write. But it's
continued here. So
it's totally continued here. And I still do, when there's a big storm coming to Shelby, I'll still make Facebook posts on that. And, I get these friend requests from people that I have no idea who they are, and they live somewhere in North Carolina. And most of the time I just don't accept them because I don't want to, then have to see their cats for the next, the rest of my life, even though I have no idea who they are. So I can't explain it. It's a funny little phenomena and a wonderful hobby that I really love.
Right. And you're also publishing, this is a recent development, right? The Fanatical Middle.
Right.
.com. And I described it as a news blog, but is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, it's just a place for me to back to this idea that if you're just barreling down the ideological railroad line and not considering other points of view, you're really not doing the world justice.
Right.
That's just not how the world works. That this is not a party platform existence we're in, and we need more Republicans and Democrats to say, wow, I'm going to vote for Biden or Trump, but I sure don't agree with them on these 2 things. Or, man, I want Trump to lose worse than anything in the world, but he was actually right about that thing. Or I agree with him on this thing. Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to do that, then you're just kind of a cheerleader in some, High School Musical production of politics, right? The political version of High School Musical, and you're not adding anything to anything. And so I did one on the whole monument thing,
right?
And where I came to is I find that I can draw a line between Robert E. Lee and Thomas Jefferson, where Robert E. Lee falls on one side of the line, and Jefferson on the other. Right. We look at the totality of what they did, and the totality of what Robert E. Lee did was a very successful general in a very unworthy cause.
Right.
Jefferson was a flawed human who led an incredibly important political experiment that resulted in an unbelievable contribution to humankind.
They should be judged differently.
Yeah, they should be judged differently. And nuance is my favorite word, and I think it's something that we need to recapture.
And so this allows you to explore those thoughts
in
different subjects.
Yeah, so I went a couple of weeks without posting, then I did 2 or 3 things in a row, and it's just as I see things that need, I think, more depth and nuanced discussion and contemplation, those will be the things I'll be going for.
Right. And that's at fanaticalmiddle.com.
That's right.
Right? Okay, good. You've talked about your wife, Dina, and the obvious importance in her life and what she means to you. But tell me about her. Why is she such a good complement to you, and why has it worked for you together? Or I'm assuming she's a good complement to you.
Oh, yeah. At Swanee, we were together so long, 3.5 years. She's a year ahead of me. She graduated in 87.
That's better than saying older than you.
Yeah,
right?
I almost said it, and I said ahead of me. And they started to call us Skina, Skina, because we were together so much. That's so hard to answer. To know us is to know exactly how that and why we work together. To explain it, I think, is a very different thing. She is has a huge heart full of joy, laughs a lot, and is just somebody that people are attracted to. I'll tell you that this is the best way I can describe, and she's kind of loud, and when she started at a law firm in Fort Walton Beach, one of the partners there, who's a dear friend, this was a really kind of buttoned up, everybody stays in their office or cubicle, quiet kind of place. And
right.
We were having lunch, and she's still a dear friend of me today. And she said, I think Dina will really have to get used to this quieter workplace. And I immediately broke into a grin and said, and she's like, what's so funny? I said, well, we'll talk later, but my guess is that you're going to have to get used to Dina more than she's going to have to get used to you. And so sure enough, she was there for 18 months. And I remember they had a going away thing for her. Who has a going away thing for her? And the staff, are crying, that she's leaving.
After just 18 months.
Yeah, it's just 18 months. And so that's she's never met a stranger. I'm much more dry and more introverted, and we're just, we complement each other very well.
And you have 3 children.
Yes.
Right? Tell me about them.
Mary Frances is our oldest. I'm probably going to mess the ages up here. I think she's 25, and she works at Moore with Karen and Terry R. there, and is doing very well, and really enjoys that. She lives in town. Matthew is my middle son. He just graduated from the Dedman Hospitality School at FSU. Great time to be graduating in the hospitality segment. So he had job offers that disappeared. And so he's working on trying to find something, and is doing well on that search, and doing some part-time stuff in the interim, and is just a great young man. And then Will is my youngest, just graduated from Childs, and is going to do sports management at FSU. He's doing the TCC to FSU program because, now to get into FSU, you have to have a 9.5 GPA and have scored 4 million on your SAT.
Right, which is tough.
Yeah, so he's looking forward to that. They're great kids. We have a great family.
That's awesome. All right, Skip, 2 more questions. First, looking back, what is the one thing or person that you would say changed or altered the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, so the 2 people would be Brad Jones. Well, I've already talked about both of them. Brad Jones, who really helped me get my act together in college, and if that hadn't happened, I would have ended up being a plumber or something like that, which is a perfectly wonderful field, but not, I think, what I was called to do. So he got me on the right track. And then Jenny Lambert, who mentored me through my most of my journalism career and prepared me to be a leader.
Right.
So those 2 folks.
And final question. This podcast is named How I Got Here. Mm-hmm. So we talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I've started a consulting company. I think I can help people with crisis communication. I think I can help people with marketing strategy. I'm interested in doing that. I think this future of nonprofit news is interesting. I want to learn more about it. I think that if for-profit journalism continues to struggle, that's something that I also want to look at. I'm interested in public discourse. So, I've always been drawn to the village square. And then I have some opinions that, for this market that I think are important, that I'm starting to talk about and want to talk about more.
Do you want to share any of those ideas?
Well, yeah, I'm going to speak pretty frankly now, more frankly than if I was at the paper. You know, we've talked a lot about crime and poverty in this market, and I think it's a terrible reality. We also talk a lot in this market about growth and the pretty open hostility to growth that exists in a lot of quarters. I think those things are very related, and I worry about it. I've been here for almost 6 years. Do you know how many significant economic development, new industry announcements there have been since I've been here? Zero. That's like astonishing.
Right. Since Danfoss, really.
Since
right?
Danfoss. What I want to say to the people who oppose growth and say, I want Tallahassee to be like it's always been, a sleepy town. I don't want things to change. I want to be able to walk from my Benton house to Cool Beans to have lunch. I want to be able to get from Killarn to my kid's school without ever hitting a stoplight or ever hitting any traffic. Okay, I get that. You need to own the South Side. You need to own the result of a no-growth county, which we are. I can't remember how recent it was, but I looked at the top 20, maybe it was 19 counties by population in Florida, and Leon was last in population growth. Okay? The product of a lack of growth is poverty and crime. Those are like back to Econ 101.
Right.
And so just own it. Just you know, if you're going to oppose growth in all of these forms, if you're not going to put a priority on economic development and new industry coming to town, that's your prerogative to do that. Avail yourself of the civic process. But people need to just understand that they're a part of the problem.
Right.
And you don't get to lament that, right, as you perpetuate it. So I'm not interested in people who oppose growth at every turn and they say, oh, well, what are we going to do about the crime problem? I'm not talking about, you know, us becoming Orlando, for heaven's sakes, but we've got this amazing resource, this Mag Lab, a crown jewel, a coveted, you know, amenity that should be the hub of economic development, and we just can't figure it out. And it drives me insane. So for me, that's the thing. That's the thing. Poverty and crime are the byproducts we need to focus on. And if we don't figure out how to go, and there's just no appetite for it here. And so the only strategy I know to come up with is to make sure people know, if that's your point of view, you need to own the byproduct of it, which is worst crime in the state, or maybe we're only third now, you know, hallelujah. Sure. And this insane poverty and Alice population that is just heartbreaking and unacceptable, and we'll never solve that by moving the dollars around in the government or the nonprofit sector. Right. That's not how those problems get solved. So for me, that's it in this town, and I don't hear that voice really coming from much of anywhere. Mm-hmm. If your position is any tree that needs to be cut down for any reason should be cut down, that's the same thing on the opposite side of this. If your position is, if we don't grow, we're going to die, and people are going to die. People are dying. I mean, let's call this what it is. A no-growth policy kills people through crime, through poverty, through all of these other things. It's just like, you know, COVID. I mean, the lockdown saves lives undoubtedly in one way. It also cost lives. The suicide rate has gone through the roof. Young people, a quarter of them have contemplated it. There's ramifications to these things. What does it mean for the public policy? Hell, I don't know. But it's worth talking about as opposed to just, masks are the devil, or if you don't wear a mask, you're going, these kind of oversimplifications of things. I just want people to talk about things in a respectful way and challenge the way things are always done, thought, and talked about.
That was Skip Foster. On a personal note, I have had the pleasure to hear Skip lead community discussions on these issues, and I'm confident that he is not alone in seeking meaningful conversation. We will decide what kind of community we will become, and I encourage you to be part of the process. Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.